Or live. Do you all have any questions just about anything at all, really? Like that's happened today? Why we're doing what we're doing? What are we doing? Anything like that? Is everyone feeling okay? All right, good. I know it can be really hard to like start a new program. You all don't know each other yet, but you will all get to know each other very well, and it'll be great. You'll have fun, believe it or not. Yeah, the first week is really, I think, is one of the hardest weeks because there's so much happening. There's so much to keep track of and get used to. So there's all of the sort of logistical and administrative talks and business that has to happen. Then, you have labs. You're trying to like do stuff on Git. You've barely done anything on Git. There's just a lot. That's kind of, you're getting your environment set up and ironing out those bugs. So there's just a lot. So I mean, work really hard, do your best, but also just kind of like chill out and we'll kind of get up to speed on things as we go along. The purpose of today's lecture, let me actually make sure I didn't skip anything. Just in terms of like recommendations, I mean, you're welcome to code along with lecture if you want to. My advice is generally not to do it because if you try to code along with lecture and then things don't work, all of a sudden you're going to get stuck in a hole of like debugging your own code instead of just following what's going on up here. I will give you opportunities to like code and stuff. I'll like actually commit because all of the lecture notes are in a Git repository. So I'll actually make a commit, push stuff up, and then let you just like access that link and work on stuff during the lecture time. Or we'll just kind of, I want you to just kind of look at code and discuss it as well, because that's something that you'll have to be able to do during like interviews and stuff. Yeah, let's just kind of jump into this. So there's a lot of little pieces here that we're getting exposed to that maybe we weren't exposed to before. So do all of you have experience with command line interfaces or using the terminal? Or how would you like put thumb in terms of how comfortable you are? Yeah, I got some like half mass, some optimistic, yeah, some thumbs up. Okay, that's totally fine. There's going to be a lot of skills that aren't sort of explicitly taught that you'll just have to kind of pick up as you go along, and that's okay. So like command line skills are one of those. You'll just kind of see them happen, or you'll just, what we usually do, we just end up copying and pasting commands for the internet, But take time to like figure out what some of those are. Same thing with HTML. We don't really explicitly teach you any HTML during mods 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Really, all of your like formal training will be from the pre-work and then whatever studying you choose to do after it, which should be pretty manageable, but I just want to kind of be clear to you on that. So let's just go over a few of the basics here on like, how do we use this command line? Because believe it or not, even though it seems archaic, it can actually save us a lot of time. If I want to, there's a lot of vocabulary that we're going to get exposed to. So this notion of a directory, same thing as a folder, right? A directory, folder, that's all the same thing. So for instance, if you want to see what folder you're in because your shell profile is not, things aren't very clear in it, you can do something called PWD, right? Does anyone know what that stands for? Present working directory, yeah. So this shows me exactly like the full directory in the computer, like where I'm at right now, which can be useful. You'll see that there's kind of a difference between this and what I actually see here, and that's because this tilde is shorthand for like the user home. So from the actual root of the hard drive of the computer, the user home lives at user/lmiller4. So I can actually save myself a lot of time if I just want to like go to my user home where like my documents and pictures and stuff are. I can just change directories to the tilde and I go back to my user home right there. And then this is where like all of my, the folders that you're used to kind of working with might be. And now I need to go back to where I was. You may not know this, but if you hit Tab, most terminals will autocomplete stuff for you or suggest things for you, which can save you a lot of time. So like, especially in Z shell, I can just write STU and it already kind of fills out the rest of that for me, which is super nice. Okay. What else? There's another thing that I do all the time, which is this ls. Anyone have an inkling of what that means? Yeah, list something. And one thing I like to do is I like to celebrate people that put themselves out there, because it's not easy, even in a group of 6, maybe especially in a group of 6, I don't know, to like, share your knowledge or take a stab at something. So I like to do snaps. So let's give some snaps to Justin for sharing. Yeah, I do snaps because claps, the acoustics in here can be a little harsh. So we're gonna like summon our inner like hipster and snaps. Do snaps. Okay, cool. There's a few other cool tools here too that I'll show you. If we want to create a new file, we don't have to do like I want to put the Arrested Development music on while I'm doing this, like let me get, gotta make a new window, and I gotta like go in here and find the, there it is, and then I can't even actually make a new file from scratch in Finder, because that's not even a capability. I can only make a new folder, so I've just wasted all of that time, right? But if I want to do this, just to prove to you in the command line, if I want to make a new file, I can just be like touch new file.txt. Boom! I've made a new file. There it is. I feeling good. Awesome. And I can see that in VS Code. Wow, new file. Awesome. So it's worth your time to figure out some of these tools. You can make a new folder or a directory, because we're software engineers now and we need our own lexicon so people can't understand what we're doing. So make directory, a new folder. We'll make a new directory in here as well. And yeah, that's just a few examples here. You're already used to using some other command line tools like Git. Right? We could do git status to kind of see the status of, here's our branch, here are these changes that we haven't staged for commit. So it's like warning us, like, hey, you've been doing things, but you're not keeping track of the changes that you've made. All of this is pretty important. One big tool that you all got access to while setting up your environment was IRB. Does anyone have experience with IRB? So this is the, interactive Ruby environment. So this creates something called a REPL, a read, evaluate, print loop. So every line that you write gets read and evaluated, and the results of it get printed, and this can happen over and over again. So I can, in Ruby, do 1 + 1, and it'll show me what that returns. And so this is a great place to, if you're kind of working on something, but you're scratching your head, you're like, oh, what was that array method, or what will this do? Just pop into IRB and make that happen. And then to exit, I think, yeah, there we are. And we can run Ruby code just by typing Ruby in the name of the file that we want to run. So if I want to touch, and I want to make a new Ruby file, I can go into VS Code. I can say like puts there, and I can actually run that file by doing that. Cool. Wow. Awesome. So this is, these are the kind of nuts and bolts of what we're working with. And one thing that's cool too is Visual Studio Code installs some command line tools for you as well. So if you type code dot, it will open the present folder in VS Code. So there's a few things that you can work with. Does anyone else have any cool command line commands that they have exposure to or like to use? Okay.
It's fun to just do like Python or Ruby, just you can do like basic math.
Yeah, totally. I use IRB all the time because I just I want to do a quick sanity check on something, does this method actually exist? Stuff like that. Or you can copy and paste code snippets from the internet and run them in there. So it's cool. Yeah. What do we mean by, we've talked a lot today. Well, we haven't really talked. We've been pretty quiet actually the whole day. But what do we mean by setting up our environment? What is that? Why did we spend most of half of our day setting up our environment? What is this environment that we're talking about? What do you think?
All our libraries and text editor of choice, right? Because they take forever.
Okay.
All
right, snaps for Justin again. All right, nice. We got libraries and and who? Someone said something else. Okay, sorry. I can also forget the snaps sometimes too. It's not because I'm playing favorites. So libraries. What do we mean by libraries? Someone besides Justin, take a stab at this one. What do we mean by a library?
Something you might import that would give you the code additional features that aren't just built in.
Yeah.
Off the top.
Okay.
Just to keep it more efficient and cleaner, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, snaps for, so yeah, here we go. Yeah, snaps for Aaron. So we have these libraries, they're like chunks of code that are kind of like these little building blocks. It's like we're working with Legos and we can stick these things together. And it makes our project a little bit more efficient because we don't have to reinvent like array methods or, getting a particular date and time. Like Ruby actually comes with a lot of libraries built into them. So we want to solve new problems. We don't want to just solve problems that people have solved before because we'll never get a job that way. So yeah. So let's talk a little bit about working in Ruby. So really a lot of the bread and butter of programming and of software engineering we're going to try to go from like just being like programmers, like people that write code, to like software engineers, conceptualizing like the systems that we're trying to build. And really the name of the game is like managing data, right? And triggering behaviors based off of data. Like that is really what you're going to spend like the next 4 months learning how to do in really, really fancy ways, but ultimately you are like a magician and your medium is data. And so in the spirit of that, like every programming language concerns itself with like some fundamental data types. It distinguishes like between apples and oranges and carrots, It's like these are distinct things. So can any of you think of some data types in Ruby? And actually I want to kind of mix up the whole like, let me ask you something and wait for the students to respond. Why don't you just talk amongst yourselves, like with a neighbor or a partner or whatever. I used to teach high school, so sometimes I use some weird like school words, so it's not because I think you're children, but it's just a habit. So yeah, just talk amongst yourselves for a little bit and see like what are the data types in Ruby that you've been exposed to so far? Okay, let's come back together here and see what your thoughts are. So, what are anyone besides Aaron and Justin? Not that I'm picking on anyone in particular, at least not yet. What are some of the data types of Ruby?
Hashes.
Hashes. Okay, yeah. Snaps for Dan. Hashes is a data type for sure. What else? What else do we got? Someone besides Aaron and Dan and Justin. Integers, yeah, totally. Snaps for, Michael. Aaron, you're Michael, I'm sorry. Oh, and I've been calling you Aaron this whole time? Wow. Yeah, you gotta call me out on that. Thank you, Aaron, Michael. Now I'm gonna be mixing that up, but that's all right. So yeah, integers are totally one. There's actually another type of number in Ruby as well. Does anyone? Float, yeah, totally. So in general, Ruby just like knows what a number is, but it distinguishes between whole numbers or integers and decimals or floats. Yeah. Okay, what else do we have? Someone besides Michael, Aaron and Michael and Justin and Dan. String, yeah, snaps for Austin. All right, strings are definitely a data type, and they're not something you make clothes out of. They are just words, right? What else do we got? Someone besides... Yeah. What else? What other data types are there?
Symbols.
Symbols. Yeah. All right. Snaps for Sylvia. Right. We got symbols, and then we also have Booleans, and we have what else? What? Arrays. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. We've got arrays, and actually nil, the absence of a value, is considered a data type in Ruby as well. Okay. So this is our bread and butter in the Ruby universe. Excuse me. That is what. Anything that any information we're trying to keep track of has to fit in one of those boxes. Now, one thing is kind of interesting though, there are two of those particular data types that are sort of kind of meta data types, right? They don't have to do necessarily with information itself, but like how that information is stored. So hashes and arrays are ways in which we can kind of store data in Ruby. And you all have experience with this recently with the Hashketball lab, right? Everybody's favorite, the one that we were harping you all to finish before you got started here. And that's because, you know, this is being able to manipulate data and read really weird notation like this is a skill that is so fundamental and that you will use like your entire career. So, well, the name kind of gives it away, but this this is a hash, right? What gives it away? How do we know that this is a hash?
Curly brace.
Yeah, curly braces. Yeah, snaps for Aaron. And you know, what's great is that this is really true of a lot of different languages. If any of you have experience with Python, Python has, it's not called a hash, it's called a dictionary, I believe, or a set, which is like a hash just composed of unique keys. JavaScript doesn't call them hashes, they call them objects. Thanks, JavaScript, for confusing us. But all of these, like hash in Ruby is a shout out to this general structure in computer science called a hash table, which is kind of exactly what we see here, which is there are these unique keys that have respective values. And none of these keys can be repeated, although, let's see. You know, each player has a number of points, rebounds, and so forth. All of these keys are within their own particular hash, so it's okay. Yeah, so there's an array here. We've got some arrays. How do we know that, what gives away that we're looking at an array? Anyone spot the array? Brackets, right? Square brackets, snaps for Dan. All right, great. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page here. You may laugh, but this is pretty fundamental stuff. So the brackets always give away that we're looking at an array. An array is this ordered list, right? And we keep track of like which item is which using indices. And that is, man, we're going to be doing a lot of this. So we're going to practice this a little bit. I want to be careful not to talk too much. So we're going to do a few exercises here. Not physical ones, of course, because that would be too much fun. But what I'd like you all to think about is what the following, just thinking about it in your brain, because this is an important skill to practice. What do the following lines of code return? So we have this variable r is this with this method to_a. We also have that same variable mapping over it, and for each of those asking that number if it's even, and then we're also selecting from that number, we're gonna, for each iterable, we're gonna just do 7 or something, I don't know. So talk amongst yourselves, see what do these three return, these 3 chunks of code return. We'll talk about it in like a minute. Okay, what do you guys think? Who wants to? We can have a couple of people tackle this one. Who wants to take on the first question? Yeah, what are you thinking, Dan?
I think it will create an array, and each indice is in between the number 1 to 100. So like index 0 is 1, index 1 is 2, etc., all the way to 100.
Okay, all right. Any doubters? Anyone want to fight Dan? I would never want to fight Dan. Okay, all right. Well, let's check it out. I'm going to do this, and then I'm actually going to throw in my favorite tool of all time, and that is a binding.pry. Any of you have experience with this? It should have been brought up during the pre-work, but what this essentially allows us to do is put a pause button in our code. So as our code is being executed, when the interpreter encounters binding.pry, it will stop and it will give us kind of an image of what is happening at that particular moment and place in our code. And I have to require the library, which in the Ruby world we call a gem, up at the top. So. Okay, let's take a look. I'm going to go ahead and run our code, but I need to remember what is that file. Hashketball. Okay, let's run it. And wow, let's do R. Yeah, and wow, that's amazing. So we have an array of 100 numbers. So snaps for damned. Nicely done, you and Sylvia. Took it on. Okay, so if we didn't know what this was, though, what would we do? Like, what would be your strategy for like what the hell is this? Like parentheses, we got some dots, this 2a. What do we do?
Well, I Googled .2a.
Yeah, awesome. Snaps for Sylvia, because that's like so much the name of the game is to just Google things. And I would actually, I will encourage you all often to just Google things and then kind of be smart about it. Maybe we don't just put 2a, maybe we put Ruby, method, docs, and this is great, docs.rubylang. I would encourage you to go for your first stop to be documentation. Go to the primary source because this is kind of the level that you want to be working on. This is the language you want to be able to read and speak. So, oh, wow. Yeah, so I'm not seeing my 2a yet, so let's search the page. There's that method. Returns self, if called on a subclass of array, converts the receiver to an array object. Very good. Okay, cool. So this is telling me that maybe this is going to get turned into an array. And then if I'm looking at this code and I'm like, I have no idea what this is, maybe I can just do that. Maybe do a little Ruby. What is this? Is there any cool way to create an array with all of those? And then they're like, the range class. That must be maybe what range is. So this is how Stack Overflow can be useful. What is a range? A range represents an interval. Cool. So it's this like set of parentheses with the dots that gives me a range, and then Ruby will kind of fill in the values in between these two here. And then there's something about these dots, whether things are inclusive or not. And then we can see this is actually exactly the situation we found ourselves in as well. Okay, but so as you're trying to solve things, I would say Stack Overflow and the documentation should be kind of your number one spots. Blog posts, stuff like that. But see if you can start with the docs to figure stuff out. Though it can be really hard if it's just syntax and there's not like an array method name like that is. This is pretty weird, right? But we figured out what it was. So with that in mind, I'm going to give you a couple minutes here. Let's talk about in a couple minutes what does these 3 lines do and what do these 3 lines do. So turn it back over to you. Okay, you guys are pretty quiet, so that must mean you already know the answer to it. So let's see. Any takers on lines 123 through 127? What do you expect to see here?
Our .map makes a new array from the original, so from there.
How do you know that?
From messing around with it.
Okay, nice. All right. Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah.
So then what it will get, like after it like goes through the do num
Mm-hmm.
on each number, it will have an array, like a new array.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So so one thing we got to figure out is what does dot map do, right? And dot map, as you mentioned, Aaron, and snaps for you for putting yourself out there, is dot map will take an array and return an array, right? And that's always kind of a good baseline question to ask yourself is like, what is this thing taking in and like, what is it giving back to me, right? So we have an array of like, of numbers like, 1, 2, 3, and then we can chunk this into our map method box here, and out we get another array, right? And then the question is like, what does this array look like? Do we get back like the same values or not? And you're saying, Aaron, that we're going to get back whatever's in this block right here. Yeah, so num.even question mark. One of my favorite things about Ruby is that it actually lets you use like question marks and exclamation marks in the method names, and it clues you in to what that method does. So question mark method in Ruby means it's going to return a what? Boo, exactly. Snaps for Sylvia. Awesome. Yeah, it's going to return a Boolean. So is 1 even?
No.
Thank you. Snaps for yeah. Awesome. So false. Is 2 even? Yes. No. So we would expect this to, as Aaron was pointing us in the right direction, to give us back an array of true or false values, right? Let's see. I don't know. We'll call it that. Throw in our, or we could just, let's just puts it for fun, so I don't have to take all that time. So if we go back and run Hashketball, we'll get back. Oh yeah. Well, we can't tell it's an array because it gets formatted, because this gets printed to standard out to your terminal output. So that's why we don't see all the commas and brackets and everything. But this looks like the right deal here. Okay, cool. So what about this one? This is a little. Well, actually, wait. Any questions on that? We're good. Okay. What about this guy? Who has an opinion about what this is going to return to us? We're taking this array of numbers from 1 to 100. We're calling the select method on it. And for each one of those, we're 7ing. There's a 7 there. So that's exciting.
There needs to be some kind of symbol like related to num, right? Like it would have to be like, because you could do dot select and it would like, if you just wanted the number 7 in your array of numbers, then you just have to change it to be like num equals 7?
Potentially, yeah. So it's let's make sure we actually know what select does, right? So if I were who I am, which I am who I am, I would. Sorry, that was weird. I would be looking up like the. Let's see. I would be looking up the select method. So select. I don't like this. I'm gonna find the actual method. God, I do like Ruby docs, but searching it can be a bit of a pain. Oh, there we are. That's what I wanted. Okay. So select says it returns a new array containing all elements of the array for which the given block returns a true value. And if no block is given, an enumerator is returned instead. Okay. Interesting. So, yeah, what is this thing? Yeah, great. So what is this like? We're in this block. Remember, Ruby, the last line of a method or a block or whatever, Ruby is weird, and this is one thing I don't like about Ruby. Not that I should let my personal feelings interfere with your learning, but it's like this implicit return can be kind of confusing, right? It's like we don't explicitly see return 7, but that is what is really happening here. The last line of any method or or block is going to be returned. So with 7 here, 7 is going to be returned. Is that true? Is that false? Like, how does that fit in with what we know about select? For which the given block returns a true value if no block is given and an enumerator is returned instead. Well, we're given a block. Should we just try it and see? Have I confused you all at this point? All right, let's see. Let's do select R. And we'll put a binding.pry in here just so we can poke around. Oh my goodness. These keyboards are too good. Oh, and this is not JavaScript, so we don't need a semicolon. Okay, so let's run this bad boy and see. Here's our array, looking good. And let's look at our select array. Oh, wait, was that right? Let's try this again. What? Like, what are we looking at here? Why did we get back to, like, the same array again?
Because it has 7 in it?
Well, because like what you said is like it would return a 7, but when you're still just doing the array, like the 7 that it would print would be like any 7, like you could, it's not related to the array. So what you're doing is just printing the original array.
It's like, hey, 7, and Ruby's like, nice, and then we just like, and then we get the same array back. Yeah. Well, so I have this sneaking suspicion. It's only because I have a little more experience that like 7 is 7 true or false? Maybe we could think about it that way, right? I mean, it's not a Boolean value, granted, but most languages give us some leeway, and they say that we have truthy things and we have falsy things. So in your world, would 7 be more true or false?
True.
Yeah, true. Like, it's intuitive to us. Like, well, 7 is something, right? So it would be true. I could test this experiment by putting in nil. Like, to me, nil, that seems pretty false. So let's run this again and see if we get back an empty array. And if we don't, then my head's going to explode. We'll have to reconsider our understanding of things. Okay, so we get an empty array back. So select is weird, right? I mean, normally, properly, we would actually put like something that returns a Boolean. Like if we did num even, that actually returned a Boolean value, like, and that's the world that we want to live in, we should get back an array of even numbers, which we do. But if we don't actually have like a true or false in here, then it's going to take whatever values returned, and it's going to say, is this truthy or is this falsy? And depending on whether it's truthy or falsy, it'll give us that array back. So that was a weird example. A lot of great nuance here. Any questions on that?
Wait, so what if it was like, what if you had like an array from like 8 to 100 and then you had the 7? So 7 is still true, but it's not in the array.
But it's not really looking to see if it's in the array or not.
Yeah,
It's just like, here's 7, like, have fun, yeah. And then it's like, okay, 7, that's not true or false, but I guess it's more true than false, so, yeah. Yes, you're right. When we're not using the enumerator variable here, the num, I mean, we're not really caring about anything in the array. So we put 7 there, it doesn't care. Yeah. We could have an array of like letters, and if we put 7 there, we just get them back. So I don't know why that's there, but just there to trick you, I guess. Okay, actually I want to take a little break. Sorry, there's a tendency that I have to like talk too much. I try to keep the lectures between like to an hour and a half if absolutely needed, but it's brutal sitting here for that long. So I'd like you guys to just take a few minutes, stand up, stretch your legs, touch 4 walls, use the restroom, whatever you need to do, and then we'll revisit this guy and we'll work on Hashketball a little bit. What is that? What is the name of this? it's Curb Your Enthusiasm. Wow. But why isn't it playing? Oh, why isn't this playing Hindi? I wonder. It's so funny. No, it happens every time. So,
Because it flash green, but then.
yeah, no, it's every time we issue people cards, they don't work in the lecture room, so you have to go to the front desk and be like, hey, can you give me lecture room access? Yeah, it's not your fault at all. It's just, yeah. But even when we give people access, like intermittently, they'll like lose it. Oh no, here we go. Sorry, let's see, let's do an experiment.
Yeah.
No, please. No? Okay, yeah, looks like you all need to get lecture room access for your cards. So all you need to do, you all can probably just go up as like a group and then go to the front desk and be like, hey, like, paying big money for this WeWork membership and I'm not getting access to my rooms. You ever have that moment when you've like been talking about something and you realize that the name of it is something else? So I was like, the Arrested Development theme. I meant the Curb Your Enthusiasm theme, which
I
is,
always get those two mixed up.
yeah. I mean, and what's funny is like I barely watch them. I appreciate those shows so much, but yeah. This is what I get for just being like a casual fan or something, I guess. I don't know. Yeah. Okay, so how did you guys find the pre-work? Was it doable? Was it a lot? Did you feel like it was a good use of your time?
The ID was like getting in trouble. So
Okay.
That was the biggest thing. Everything else though, it was a good amount, but it wasn't too bad.
Okay.
What was getting you in trouble?
ID, so like the run thing.
That browser
There's like a lot
editor.
of times I would have to like plug my code into a different ID just to test it, and it was because like it'll keep saying that it's wrong, but I'll be like,
Yeah.
everything like checks out perfectly.
Really?
When I put it somewhere else, because they said that I didn't finish the Hashketball, but I turned it in, everything was right. But then they emailed me saying, if you don't have this done by Sunday.
Bum, bum, bum. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, what is done?
Yeah. That's all right. Yeah. I don't know why. Did you let them know that you were having issues with the?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
But then when I told them, they were like, I don't know how to approach this. I'm like, thanks.
Well, yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Uh-oh. Get this. Come on, man. No, all of you guys need to go up and, yeah.
I don't know.
All of you need to go up and.
Yeah, no, I have a weird problem with it too. even with Hashketball, it like wouldn't let me submit until I did the bonus cards or something.
Oh, weird.
Yeah.
I didn't have that one.
Yeah.
Huh.
This wasn't only.
I
Okay.
had a problem too. It kind of was hard for me to get it to go through, so I ended up just doing everything.
So the Learn ID is the in-browser Learn ID is trash. Is what that's what you're saying, or it wasn't helpful.
Well, no.
Okay.
Just on the Hashketball, that was the only one that
Okay.
was like kind of tough to get it to greenlight it.
Interesting. All right. Well, if hopefully you all like kind of barked a little bit, made a little bit of noise to your recruiter, your person, yeah. And then I will. They have one channel, and I'll talk through another channel, and hopefully we can get this resolved. Let's warm back into things here with instructors. So we want to define a method. So now we're going big league. We're not just going to do these one-off lines. We're going to actually write a method called getNames that takes an array of instructors and just returns their names. And let's be a little bit more explicit here. Returns an array of just their names. Okay. How are we going to do this? What do you guys think? First thoughts? Yeah, okay, so thanks, Dan. So that's for Dan, getting us warmed back up. All right, start a method. We're going to call it getNames. I'm going to write this end keyword before I forget. And okay, great, nice. Now what? Now what do we do?
Write it if.
We can.
I was just gonna, well, I guess we have to do the each first. Well, actually, because
Mm.
you could just do if instructor's name well, you would have to do a loop, or like in
Create an empty array first.
We just do the array dot each and then
Okay.
equal do and then the
Okay. I need to make sure I'm passing this array in, right? So I'm going to put that argument there, and then and then we're going to do it. We're going to do an array dot each.
array dot each
Okay.
with the do and
We'll just say element, or we could say instructor, I guess. That'll have to do. Okay, great. And then what are we doing with these?
and then so that was return arrays.
We need to do that again.
We need to do what again?
We need to do another each since it's a hash.
Oh, you want to iterate through the hash?
No, I just have to do
If,
we just do an instructor with the name.
Oh,
yeah, we just,
or, yeah, if, no, yeah, if.
no, we just put in the name.
I just put the name symbol and then
okay.
But we need a resulting array too.
yeah.
So,
Oh, okay. So we need to create an array to put all these things in.
yeah.
So we call it new array. And then we want to make sure to return our new array, so I'll put that there. And then how are we going to get this into our new array?
Yeah. Push it or shovel.
Oh, I love this shovel. Yeah. Okay. So shoveling that. Okay. Cool. All right. Let's take a look at it. We'll call getNames. We'll pass in our instructors, and we'll call. Okay. And or actually, maybe we could do this. Maybe we can. Okay, so let's run this guy and see what happens. So look at it, this guy. Okay, cool. So if we look at our instructors, all right, nicely done. Now your first rodeo. Okay, snaps for all of you guys. So this is one way that we could do this, and we hit each. And what's great about each, we hit each element in the array, and then we do something. And it can be whatever we want. We don't really have to worry about, this isn't going to alter this array. It's not going to return anything back to us. It just gives us an opportunity to do something with each of these. There is a more concise way that we can do this, though. Does anyone have any ideas? Let's think about what we're taking in. We're getting an array in, right? And we're just returning an array of the same length, but it's been transformed. So what method have we used so far to do that? We've mapped, right? So one thing that we could do is, if we want to save ourselves the trouble of making a new array and returning that array, we can actually map, we can call map on that array. And for each enumerable, we can just grab whatever the value of the name key is there. And so if we do that, we'll end up with the same result. Like that. Yeah.
One thing I've noticed about Ruby, since I've done a little bit more Python, is that there's multiple ways to do things in Ruby.
Yeah.
Is there really like
A Rubonic way?
is there a difference in efficiency, or can you kind of just do whatever you feel comfortable with like the syntax and how you write it out?
Yeah.
You could do the same thing with like a for loop or something, and instead of map, because map is new to me, but
Yeah.
map's the right way to do it in Ruby.
Yeah, that's a great question. So snaps for Aaron, for Michael, so for thinking about that. Oh, Justin, did you have a opinion or something you want to?
Yeah, I was wondering if that had something to do with the runtimes, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Like all the different functions, like creating each one for a faster runtime, I guess.
Yeah.
For a different reason.
Yeah, so you can absolutely like measure like how long it takes to do this. I forget, there's a particular library for doing that. I forget what it is, and I'm not going to actually go into that now, but you could definitely do that. I would say beyond the performance argument, because we're essentially dealing with the same data structure, and that's really going to make your biggest performance difference, is you want to make your code, generally, I don't know, there's this sort of valley that we have to find in between making our code have fewer lines of code, but not so few that it's not legible. So if you can make your code really clean and concise and leverage the features of the language, the more you do that, the better. Except try to avoid like one-liners that are like super cryptic, because people have to read your code as well. But there's been pretty well documented research over the last like couple decades because there's so many like millions, billions, trillions of lines of code out there that the less lines of code you have, like the less chance there is for mistakes, and that's really good. So one thing we risk when we have an extra line of creating an array and another line of returning the array is like, oh gosh, we got to make sure like we write the name correctly, stuff like that. If we just leverage array methods, it'll save us like a lot of trouble and a lot of time in the long run of like typing everything out. Yeah, so that was a good non-answer for you. But I will look up a good like performance library, like something to actually measure the runtimes, and I'll send that out in Slack afterwards.
I was just curious, because like, I've noticed that like with vectorized stuff in Python, like I know if you're creating like a bunch of variables, it can slow you down.
Yeah.
Because of what's going on under the hood, you know. So,
Yeah, but I mean, for map, if we're thinking about what it's doing, it is essentially doing the same thing as what each is doing, except map is taking care of the creation and returning of the array for you. But yeah, there isn't necessarily like, I guess in Python there's this whole thing about making things Pythonic and like really leveraging the features of that language. And suppose you could make that case for any language, but Ruby really kind of celebrates like, you know, you write it the way that makes sense for you. At least that's what my experience with the community. Any other questions? So we're going to actually finally talk about Hashketball, and we'll just touch on like a couple methods, and then we'll call it a day here. So we have this Hashketball lab, and as you all have probably already experienced, you know, you're working on these assignments. You have to figure out, you know, whether they pass or not, and so to do that, we type learn, right? And we don't have learn. Interesting. Oh, that's because this isn't actually a learn assignment. We type rspec, which gives us all the errors. This is essentially when you type learn, it's running this gem, this library of code called rspec, and rspec is a testing library. And we passed 3 times and we failed a lot, and this is really depressing, and now we're questioning whether we should be here or not, and our imposter syndrome is kicking in pretty bad. So what I would suggest you do is, instead of like running and getting all the errors at once, failing fast, and you can add this option, fail fast. Another way that you can write it is just --f-f. So you could do it like this, and as soon as it hits a failure, it'll stop. And this is a little bit more manageable, right? And this is This is kind of test-driven development. It would be test-driven development if you wrote the test, but you didn't write the test, so it's not really test-driven development. I mean, maybe we'll be lucky and we'll like work for places where they're like, we want you to build something, and we've already written all the tests for you, and all you need to do is write the code to fill in the test. But realistically, you will have to write the test, and then you'll write code for the test. And this is a good little, I don't know, pen to keep in your pocket, feather to put in your cap, because you know, people at companies generally favor test-driven development practices. And if you, unfortunately, I'll just tell you, like, we only have like one lab on writing your own tests, but come back to this concept and practice it, because if you can demonstrate that you understand tests and that you can write a test and then write code to meet that test, that's a really great skill to have and show at an interview. So we're looking at this, and this looks really intimidating, but believe it or not, Ruby has some of the best error messages of any language. And so whenever you come to me and you're like, hey, like, help me, I'm going to be like, did you read the error message? And if you say no, I'm going to be like, come back to me later after you've read the error message, because we're going to have to get used to reading stuff like this. So we failed here. We expected that this method returns this number, and then it is telling us exactly why we failed that particular test, right? It says, well, we don't even have something called get players. Did you mean get names? Here's where the error actually got triggered. So let's take a closer look. If I look at Hashketball, line 158, well, that's weird. I don't know why I have that code there. I meant to get rid of that, so nothing to see here. Let's read this again. Okay, so we didn't get anything back, right? So that makes sense because we have this method defined to grab the number of points scored, to get a list of all the players, and return the number of points scored by a particular player, but we haven't written anything here, so that we're returning nil. We're not returning anything. So we have a few comments here to help us kind of piece out what we need to do. And the reason I had code in there is this is good for you to know. In the repository where we keep all of the notes for these lectures, there is a solution branch. So we might not get to everything in the lecture because I want to spare you the experience of sitting through like 2 hours of lecture. So the complete solution to any given lecture thing that we work on will be in the solution branch. But I'm working in the master branch generally, and that's what I'll upload at the end of a lecture. Okay, so we want to take care of this. We want to get the number of points scored. So far, we really have done a whole lot of nothing. We've defined the method. That's good. It's good to know that that's where we need to put our code. But we need to figure this out. So how are we going to get the number of points? Here's our plan so far. Maybe we can get a list of all the players. And then find the player whose name matches that argument and then return that player's points. So we need to look at our data structure and figure out, how are we going to iterate over this guy to actually make that happen? So I'll let you all think about it. Based off of the way that this guy is structured, how will we grab the players out of this hash? What are your thoughts? How do we get down? First off, how do we even get down to that level, right? One good practice to do is if you're dealing with a complex data structure like this, and it's not uncommon to see data structures like this, like any API that you use, just to give you an example real quick. Let's actually go here. Very useful example, Pokemon API, okay? Here it is. Here's what we get from the Pokemon API. What is this data structure? What are we looking at? Yeah, it's a giant hash. Yeah, it's called something else. This is a JavaScript object notation file, and this is technically an object, but same thing. It's a hash, right? It's got key value pairs, and it's got arrays, and there are hashes inside those arrays. It's crazy. Yeah, there's nested hashes. So this is not going away anytime soon. So one thing that I would suggest is when you're trying to figure out how to just wrap your head around how to access information, just experiment. So what I would do is actually, I keep writing binding, that's a different debugging tool. Throw in a binding.pry, right? And if we do this, we can work on actually getting to the players and their respective points. And that'll at least give us like some idea of like how we get down there. So if we look at, what's the name of this guy again? So this is the game hash. This is the, wow. Well, this is actually a little bit nicer, a little bit more digestible than what's in our file. Okay, our game hash. How do we, say we wanted to get the number of points for Reggie Evans. What's our first move? Let me,
Some hash has like two other hashes in it, right? Just the home and away, so you have to dig into those first.
okay, so which, well, Reggie Evans I know is in home, so I'll put that there. Okay, cool. So we're making some progress. Now we're in the home team. How do we get closer to Reggie Evans? Go to players. Okay, we go to players. And wow, okay, we're getting in there. So what do we do now? How do we get to Reggie Evans? Yeah, Reggie Evans! Such a good basketball name. Okay, how do we get the number of points that Reggie Evans has scored? Yeah, all right, cool. Stats for you guys. Okay, clearly you all did the pre-work. So this gives us some idea of like how deep down the rabbit hole we have to go to get that particular player's points. Now, we have kind of been advised, this is probably not the first time that we're going to, based off of like this game hash, have to look at attributes for a particular player. So what we're going to try to do first is let's cut away, we live in a very polarized time, very polarized society. Let's cut away this home and away division. Let's just get all the players. All we care about is all the players. We don't really care for right now whether they're home or away. So let's see if we can actually extract those out. So if I want to grab all of the players from the home team, how do I do that? How would I change this? Yeah, all right, thank you, Michael. Yeah, okay, all right. And if I want to get the away players, I would just do this as well, right? Okay, so this is cool. So we can combine these two hashes into one big hash. There's a particular method that we can use, but maybe we don't know, right? And I'm just like, oh, okay, well, no problem. Ruby combine hashes. What does that do for me? Wow, thank you, Stack Overflow. If we're just interleaving, which I take it we're doing, we just want to merge hash A with hash B. So let's try this out. Again, I'm just in binding.pry. I'm just playing around. I'm not writing any formal code, just trying to figure my life out a little bit. So I'm going to do game hash home players dot merge game hash away player. Ooh, easy. Players, and okay, now we have an object full of player objects, and now it'll be that much easier to like just get the points for that particular player, right? So we're going to get a list of all the players, and that is going to be, we've got our game hash. We'll just replicate this in our code now that we've got some idea. We'll take our game hash home players, and we'll merge our game hash away players. And maybe we want to call this, oops, sorry, I'm in JavaScript mode today. Need to get used to Ruby again. So player hash. Cool, and that should give us a hash of players, right? If we want to find the player whose name matches the argument player name, well, actually, that's pretty easy, right? If I have this giant object, let's do this, actually. Ooh. Well, if I have this giant object, we can just base off of what we're seeing here. In order to get to a particular player, right, I just would pass in that particular player's name as a key. So we'll go in, and in the player hash, just pass in that player name. And in order to get that player's points, I could do exactly what you all pointed out to me, which is just pass in the points key as well. Let's look at this data structure. Okay, cool. So now that we've done that, let's throw our binding.pry down here so that we can actually use this method and then see if we've actually successfully been able to crack this nut, so to speak. And that is, there's a bit of a glitch with binding.pry where it doesn't like being the last executable line of code in a file. So I'm just going to put something at the bottom, and yeah, this is a very hacky way of dealing with this problem, but it's good enough for government work. So, all right, so we're going to run this guy, and we're going to go, of course, into our pry REPL. Yeah. And then let's try to exercise this method a little bit. So we've got num points scored and pass in a player name. So Bismack Biombo should have 12 points. Get back 12 points. Okay, nice. Let's go ahead and run our let's go ahead and run our tests and see if we've made any progress. We're going to fail fast, and okay, we need to we need to cut this out here. Okay, so we've failed again, right? Hashketball shoe size knows the shoe size of each player. Okay, this is the last thing we're going to do, and then you're going to be free, I promise. So sorry, I know we're going a little long. Let's try to crack this next nut. So first, well, before we do that though, we need to stop, when we're writing code, we need to stop and recognize when we've created something useful. Like code is all about like abstraction and then creating sort of reusable abstractions that we can use everywhere else. And it's just layers upon layers of these useful little self-containing abstractions that people build that we can stack together like Lego. So one of these things might be this list of all the players, right? Like this is actually a pretty good general thing to like keep in mind. We don't want to keep it trapped in our number of points scored because we're probably going to need it for another method. And so we can create something called a helper method, which just is a method like anything else, but it's a method that we're going to use with other methods. So helper method, we're going to define it as player hash, and player hash is going to equal the game hash, or it just is going to return the game hash merged with all the players merged, like so. So this gives us our helper method. So when we want to get a list of all the players, well, this will take care of it, like so. Let's make sure that we're still passing the tests. Oops, no, I don't want to run it, sorry. That was anticlimactic. It's like, what am I doing? Okay, so we're still passing all the tests, that's good. So now let's just try to do the last thing. So we want to define a method shoe size that takes a player's name and returns that player's shoe size. So talk amongst yourselves for a minute. How are we going to do that? Okay. Who wants to take this one on? How are we going to solve, oops, that wrong direction. How are we going to do this? How are we going to grab the shoe size of any old player?
Start using the helper method you just made.
Okay. So we've got this, returns the player hash. Cool.
So we have to define the hash. We have to define the first.
Okay, so we want shoe size. And we're going to pass in a player name. Okay. And then we got our player hash. Okay.
And then from there, you can just do player name.
Mm-hmm.
And then instead of points, do shoe size.
Ooh, here we are. Okay, cool. Let's test it out. And And we got nil. Interesting. So it's fine. I expected something, right? So I need to go back and make sure, do a sanity check on my data structure. And that is because it's just called shoe, of course. Yeah, so we run it. Wow, 6 examples, and then we failed. Snaps, yeah, all right, snaps to Aaron. And this is the game, right? This is what we're gonna do for the next 4 months, is we're gonna build stuff, and then it's gonna break, and we're gonna fail, and then we're gonna do a little bit more, and it's gonna fail, and then we're gonna do something and get it working, and think it's gonna work forever, and then it's gonna fail. And that's all we're gonna do. We are going to become really good at failing. And if you leave this boot camp being excellent failures, we will have succeeded, because this is a very humbling and fast-moving industry, and if you're not willing to fall on your face or your butt or whatever body part makes you most uncomfortable, then you're not going to get very far. So, congratulations all of you for making it this far. I mean, I don't know really what else to cover. It seems like you all have a pretty good handle on this stuff. Our plan for the rest of the day is to, of course, we have our Justin, who's managing our class static site. So when all of you are done kind of making each other's pages for that, just push to Justin's repo, and he will make a pull request and actually pull and merge those into the master branch. And when you're done with that, I will have deployed the next round of labs, and we'll just keep cruising along. And we will be out of here at 6. Again, the whole like 9 to 6 thing, that's just because